조작인 것 같아 너만 준비돼 있다면
Welcome to Sex at 10. I'm Rebecca Rosenblat, certified relationship and sexuality therapist and your host, here to answer your questions on all things intimate. Whether you're stuck in a relationship dilemma, have issues with your body, trust, trauma, addiction, or orientation, or just need little help with turning up the heat in your bedroom, give us a shout at 1-800-968-7836 and let's chat. Everything's fair game. If you thought about it, we can talk about it. Let's begin with a discussion on sexual positivity and open relationships. And to help me with that, we're being joined by Gracie X, sex-positive author of Wide Open, My Adventures in Polyamory, Open Marriage, and Loving on My Own Terms. Gracie practices ethical non-monogamy and relationship artistry as a daily tenet in relationship. She has written several articles and directed and co-starred in a short film which has played at the Outfest in Los Angeles, Amsterdam, Germany, Seattle, Orlando, and on San Jose's public TV channel. Beyond that, she's toured throughout San Francisco, Vancouver, and Los Angeles in various capacities. So we're indeed very excited to be interviewing her tonight due to her dedication to the subject matter. Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for Sex at 10 tonight.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here.
Very excited. Now, Gracie, you refer to yourself as sex positive. What is the sex positive movement all about, and why is it so important?
The sex positive movement is about the belief that sex is normal and it's healthy, and anything between two adults that is consensual and negotiated is fine.
Absolutely. Couldn't have put it better myself. And it does come in myriad ways. People sometimes, especially media, can try to kind of constrict it to a small group of people, but it's wonderful to be able to embrace it in all the different ways. Let's get into open relationships next. I do a lot of infidelity work as a therapist, and the thing that hurts people the most is the lying and the broken trust. But when it comes to ethical non-monogamy, that's obviously not an issue because all parties are committed to an honest arrangement that works for everyone. So perhaps you could begin by defining what that looks like and the different forms that it can take.
So there are different camps of ethical non-monogamy. There is swinging, polyamory. Those are the two sort of big camps. Swinging is more generally a couple will come to swinging. And it's more focused on sex and sexual hookup. Polyamory is really loving many and more deep, loving relationships, romantic relationships are involved.
And there's a commitment, from what I understand.
Yeah, there can be. You know, a lot of times people fall into another category called swally, which is something in between.
I see.
You know, a lot of people that I meet and talk to, they are doing some of each. Although swinger culture is a very defined culture, and it tends to be very closeted. That's another big difference between polyamory and swinging. Polyamorous people tend to want to be out.
Now,
Yeah, I once heard somebody say that with polyamorous people, you're likely to have everybody over for Thanksgiving dinner.
That's well put. Actually, I have known families like that, and it's one big happy family. And there is a commitment to honesty. Maybe that's what I was talking about before. There's a commitment to honesty and the romance and a very loving relationship. So it's not just about a sexual hookup, as you said. So important distinction. Viewers, if you're considering an open relationship, tonight's a great night to call in and speak with Gracie. You already started to expand a little bit on those choices, and particularly trying to eliminate the confusion between polyamory and swinging. Were there any other things that you wanted to comment on along those lines? And also just open relationships in general, when, for instance, there's a couple where they agree that they will see other people with each other's consent, and they still practice discretion, and some people are quite open about it. Can you talk a little bit about some of those styles as well?
Sure. I mean, when people talk about open marriage or an open relationship, that can be any number of things. And that's one of the things that I really write about and talk about is when you're setting it up, try and really come from a place of what is going to work for you. And if you're in a partnership or a couple, what is going to work for both of you or for the triad or quad or whatever you're doing. And so there are so many different nuances of negotiations and agreements. And sometimes you'll be surprised what sets you off or what, a small thing like if somebody's going to sleep over, they can't use your computer or they can't touch your facial soap or something. Little things that you'll just talk about and figure out what works for you, and big things too.
So it's basically it's a negotiation, and you get to define the boundaries that you want. In the people that I worked with, sometimes you're right, it's the tiniest little things that you didn't think of, and it's also the intimacy part, particularly if it's one of those open relationships where it's not where there's a commitment to romance with any particular triad or a quad, as you said, but people are sort of dating other people, so they're not allowed to kiss, for instance. They can have full-on sex, they can have full-on penetration, but they're not allowed to kiss because there's that fear that an attachment will develop and it's supposed to be casual. So you're right, at the end of the day, you kind of get to define the parameters and the boundaries. And I wish even for monogamous relationships, people would have those discussions so they know what the boundaries are, particularly in our culture nowadays when, that cyberspace that's midway between fantasy and reality, and there's so many confusions. So any comments around that?
Esther Perel, the author of Mating in Captivity, she talks about that, how couples aren't talking about is pornography part of being monogamous? Is texting? What does it mean to have an email affair? Whereas people practicing ethical non-monogamy will talk very specifically about these things and will make different agreements. And sometimes your agreements change. I mean, I know with my husband, when we first opened our marriage, there were things that frightened me and I didn't want him to do. And then over time, it didn't threaten me. And I said, go off and do that. I'm fine with that. So things evolve, and the more kind and empathetic and patient you can be, the more likely that things are going to become more and more comfortable. And trust is going to build.
Trust,
huge
that's it.
piece is the trust.
Because usually when people are uncomfortable, it's because they're not feeling safe, or they fear that other relationships may evolve. Will you leave me? Will you find me less attractive? Will you be less interested in me? So I suppose with time, when you're seeing that the fire and the heat in your own relationship continues and possibly grows instead of you drifting apart, maybe that's the place where what you're talking about, that you feel comfortable and you can be more permissive. Is that sort of what you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, it is a fascinating phenomena that I've written a lot about, where having some openness in your relationship can create more eroticism and create more passion. And I think there's an element of maintaining the honeymoon period because you're still courting each other. You're more careful with each other. A lot of times in polyamorous relationships and open marriages, people are really attentive to, are they still connected intimately? Are they don't let things go on and on if they have a fight. Whereas I notice sometimes in monogamous relationships, and I'm certainly not in all of them, but you can start to take each other for granted. You can get very cavalier about turning down your partner for sex because you're the only game in town, supposedly. So, there's a different attitude in a polyamorous relationship or an open marriage where I still want to be attractive to my husband. I still want to make sure that we're really connected in that way. And then I can be generous with him when he's attracted to other people if I feel like that is still really a strong component with us.
So it sounds like it's more of a mindful arrangement.
Yeah.
Viewers, viewers, if you're in the lifestyle and have run into any issues or are considering approaching your partner to entertain the idea, tonight's a really great night to call in with your questions and concerns. Speaking of concerns, one of the things that people often bring up with me is the impact of polyamory and open relationships in general on the kids. So can you please comment on that next?
Well, my book really goes into that. My book it's a memoir, and what happened for me was I had been married to my husband Hank for 20 years, and our love life, our romantic life, had become fairly dormant. And I tried everything that people do. We went to therapy, we went to tantra workshops, and finally I asked him if we could date other people. And he was very open to it, and we researched it, and we went to counseling. We opened our marriage, and within a year, he had a girlfriend and I had a boyfriend, and we decided to transform our house from a single-family house into a duplex. And our partners moved in, and our kids could go back and forth to both sides of the house. And it was a really idyllic time in my life, and it was so much easier as a parent, because every parent knows, I mean, there are times when you need fresh horses, where you're exhausted, and the tribe, as Hillary Clinton talks about, the village, you know, it is helpful. And another thing that was great was we all had different strengths. Valerie, my husband's girlfriend, is an artist, and she did art projects with the kids. Oz, my boyfriend, is an engineer and mathematician, and he was invaluable when we had homework. And so, you know, there is a way that it can be an easier situation because it's more adults.
It does take a village. I'm a big fan of Dr. Sue Johnson, who in Hold Me Tight, she talks about how it took a village to raise the kids. But nowadays, generally, most families, you're talking about a community of two. So, and the kids were okay with it. How did you broach the subject with the kids? Well,
you know, my youngest was about 6 at the time, and he just thought it was a great situation, a great, playful, wonderful situation. My daughter was older. She was about 10, and she was adamant that Oz, my boyfriend, could not move into the house. And this is I go into it in the book. It was daunting as a parent. Oddly enough, she was perfectly fine with my husband's girlfriend moving into the house. And I think there is a double standard, even in our kids that we're raising to be, you know, aware of feminism. There is a double standard around the mom is not supposed to be sexual. She's not supposed to be going after her needs. And what happened was, after Oz had moved in, I mean, he's a wonderful person, and I would not have allowed anybody, any adult who I didn't think was wonderful, around my children. She adjusted to it, but a big piece for her was that she didn't want to be doing something different from what her peers were doing. Just at that age, she, you know, did not want to be the polyamorous family on the block. And it's unfortunate that is, you know, I mean, I feel very passionate. That's one of the reasons that I wrote the book, and I hope that there's more stuff on TV and in movies, because it is a very creative choice that is possible to make work. And I think the more that it's an acceptable choice, the easier it's going to be for kids. You know, when it was actually happening, it was a great situation for her, but the thought of it happening was very uncomfortable for her.
And, you know, sort of other people asking questions, and what do I say? Because lots of times when, even just in monogamous couples, when there's issues going on, kids are very uncomfortable. What would my friends think? What will the neighbors think? And they have all sorts of questions. But even initially, when divorce was such a rare thing, it was a big deal for kids. Now, when kids find out about their parents, you know, there may be disappointment, but they know at least 6 other kids who've gone through that and will often listen to them. So it sort of sounds sounds like as more and more people embrace the lifestyle, it would be easier for the kids. Would you be able to stick around after the break, Grace? Because I still have a few questions to ask you. Can you stick? Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Keep your calls coming, and let's discuss sex, relationships, romance, or whatever else rocks your boat. And keep it locked in Rogers TV, because we have lots more great stuff still ahead, including your calls. So pick up that phone and call so we can connect.
우리 저 작은 것 같아